Hello and welcome back to another solo episode of the Uneducated PT Podcast with me, your host Carl O'Rourke. Today um I'm going to talk about mental health, and I'm going to talk specifically about suicide and dying by suicide and the rates of young men in Ireland who are dying by suicide. And the reason I wanted to touch on this today was because I haven't spoke about it in a while, and right now I'm not feeling great at the moment. I'm feeling very down in myself. I'm feeling very aimless. I just feel like crap at the moment. And I remember, and obviously you go through waves of this. I think as a man, people in general go through waves of depression, go through waves of mental health struggles, go through waves of suicidal ideation. And I remember back in COVID, when I was really really struggling. I had just come back from um, came back from a week in Dubai with a friend, and I went back to an empty house, and I was like, you know what, I can't even be in this house by myself. And I just would leave, and I would just walk, and I would walk, and I'd walk, and I'd be walking on my own through the night. And I wasn't ready to talk to anyone about any of my struggles or issues. And I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone about them. And I was just having these thoughts ruminate in my head. And the only thing I could turn to at the time was a podcast. I would just went onto Spotify and I just typed in suicidal ideation or struggling with mental health or I can't remember exactly what it was, but I just needed to hear someone talk about the things that I was actually struggling with. And that's what I did. I put a podcast in and I just walked and I just listened to someone else's voice who I didn't know. And I thought, you know what? Since I have my own podcast, that's probably something that I should still be doing as well, because I know there's a lot of people suffering with their mental health at the moment. I know there's a lot of men who are suffering with loads of kind of different struggles that they feel like the only way out uh, is probably suicide, which can make a lot of sense to people when they're struggling with different issues. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about the different issues that um, we should be talking about in Ireland when it comes to suicide, and not just the like regular catchphrases like oh, I'd rather you cry on my shoulder than me cry at your funeral. Like, yeah, it's a great sentiment, and I believe that we should definitely be encouraging people to open up about their mental health struggles. I definitely think we do, but when they do open up, why don't we actually listen to what they're saying, what they're actually struggling with, and actually look at the systemic issues that are causing such high rates of suicide among young men in Ireland? Remember, 346 men, 4 out of 5 deaths by suicide in 2022 were men. So 436 people in Ireland died by suicide, 346 were men. And there's lots of different reasons that we should actually be talking about that can contribute to that. And I want to just start with a Richard Reeves quote that I really love, because I think it really embodies where people are at. It says, "A man who has lost his sense of usefulness is a man who is at risk of withdrawal, of addiction, and of suicide." When you don't feel useful to society, to your family, to your friends, this is why it's so powerful when men have a family, because they're there, and when they have to provide for a family, it's because they feel useful. When they have a job to go to so they can put food on the table for their family, that is them being useful. And when their family appreciates that and loves them for it, I think that can be something that men really really need. Um, so yeah, that's just going off on a tangent there. But I suppose I wanted to start by talking about the different kind of systemic issues that we should talk about when it comes to suicide in Ireland. So I think the first one is falling behind in education. I think the first thing that we should touch on is who are the people most at risk. Okay, male, young, low socio-economic backgrounds. So there's loads of things that we could talk about there, right? But obviously, falling behind in education is a big one. All right. Educational disadvantage links to poorer employment and income prospects, compounding mental health risks and help access barriers. Yeah. So put it this way: boys are falling behind in the educational system. A lot of boys struggle to self-regulate in a classroom. You're telling boys to just sit in a classroom for 9 hours and behave. It's not how a lot of boys work. It's not how I worked. I need to be out moving my body. I need to be, proactive. That's why I learn a lot better when I've moved my body. If you can get me to go out for a walk and listen to a podcast, I'll do a lot better than sitting down and reading. I struggle to keep my attention, and I struggled in school. I got one of the worst leaving certs in school. I actually left school after third year, and tried to work for a year with my dad, which didn't really work out, and I ended up getting in a lot of trouble. And then I was like, right, okay, I'm ready to go back to school if they'll have me. So I had to do a meeting and got myself back into fifth year and finished off school. And I did terrible in all my exams. Not that I wasn't a smart child, but I just struggled to hold any attention in class. I just wanted to do other things. I was just, I was bouncing off the walls. I had like a bundle of energy that I just needed to expend, and I wasn't allowed to do that. We didn't even have PE in school after third year. It was insane when I look back at that. So I would say there's a lot of boys who struggle with the current education system, and that's making boys feel like they aren't intelligent when they work in different ways to girls in a lot of ways. That doesn't mean that they can't be academic, and it doesn't mean that there isn't boys who aren't good in that environment, but I just don't think we should be treating everyone the same. But then if you don't do well in school, then you don't go and get a degree, and if you don't go and get a degree, then you might not get a high paying job. And then another thing that causes a lot of deaths by suicide is financial strain and unemployment. So if you don't do well in college, or you don't do well in school, and you don't get a good degree or a good master's, then it might be, if especially with kind of manufacturing jobs in decline as well, it means that you might not have as many opportunities as you would like. 2 to 3 times higher male risk suicide when unemployed. Risk was particularly strong for men from 15 to 54. So if you have a financial strain, if you're unemployed, and then we have a cost of living crisis as well, that is going to make it more difficult for you to, find work. And then again, if you are struggling financially, that also puts you in the category of housing, homelessness, addiction, all these things. All right, so self-harm, 30 times higher among people who are homeless, 121 deaths among people homeless in 2022. So yeah, like you have to think about it. This is not just a mental health story. This is like a housing policy story. This is a education story. This is a financial story. It's like, if most people don't need to go to therapy, they need to probably make 20k more a year than they do, and that's something that we should be having a conversation about. Like, how do we improve the quality of people's lives in Ireland? Being able to afford a home would be helpful, and not being out on the street, being able to get some form of education, and with all that as well, I think I don't have the research here, but there's a lot of research, especially in the States, that shows that men who have higher education versus those who aren't are likely to have more of a friendship group, and also to get into a relationship as well. So yeah, there are all things as well that obviously contribute to, if you feel lonely, if you feel isolated, if you have lack of relationships, that is going to contribute to poor mental health. And then on top of that, in terms of lack of relationships and friendships as well, men obviously struggle to hold on to relationships. And there's some research in regards to divorce as well, and lack of support after the divorce. Population data show higher suicide risk after separation and divorce in men. Young divorced men at a high risk. There's there's a name for this. I can't actually find it, but it's basically, when two people get together, all the kind of outside partnerships or relationships that you were in start to kind of thin out. And usually the male ends up taking on the relationships of the female as well. So you lose that connection with friends after you get in a relationship with someone, and then they get divorced in their mid-40s or their mid-50s, and they're like, oh, where's all my support systems? I don't have any. So they're all kind of things that contribute. Just some. There's loads more I could talk about as well. Addiction as well, which obviously coincides with homelessness, coincides with struggling or falling behind in the education system. And all these things contribute to what I said before about Richard Reeves's quote. Is like, when you feel useless, when you don't have friends, when you don't have a home, when you can't make money or feel like you can't make money, you're unemployed, when you don't feel that you have opportunities, and then you feel aimless because of that, what would be the point in sticking around? That would be your mindset, and I can completely get that. I completely get that. So there are all things that we need to look at. And obviously, this is something that really, really annoyed me as well. Because I think it's something that can solve a lot of problems for people. And now I'm biased when I'm saying this because it's something that really helped me. Obviously, I didn't do well in education, okay? Which means that I would have had a lack of opportunities in regards to, making money and, making a little world for myself, and then engaging in friendships, meeting new people, feeling like I'm useful to society, feeling like I'm useful to my community, feeling like I'm useful to people. But then I found fitness, and fitness really helped me. And obviously I played sport when I was younger, and a lot of that really, helped me in many, many ways. Like even just playing football and having structure throughout my week. And, on the weeks when I did feel useless, when I did feel crap, when I was suffering from my mental health, I had a reason and accountability to kind of just show up on a pitch with, 16 to 20 other lads. And even when I was feeling like crap, you'd go and you'd run around and you'd move your body, and you're also just having a little bit of crack and a laugh with other lads. And even when you're feeling like crap, they lift you up because they're in a good mood and they're joking with each other. And before you know it, right, you've moved your body so you feel physically better. You also feel mentally better because you're outside. You've also created a little bit of community and social connection and bonded with other people. So you're hitting all them things that are going to help you to just feel better about your mental health. You feel connected, you feel part of a community, you feel useful because you're part of a team that's helping you to feel useful. You do feel useful. They need you and you need them, and there's a lot to be said for that. And then there's the accountability to show up even when you're not feeling great. And I do believe that, like, community sports, whether that is football or whether that is athletics or whether that's basketball or whether that's tennis or whether that's just run clubs, or whether that's bowling, or like finding anything, whatever it is that gives you community, that gives you connection, that keeps you active, that's really, really important. And why this pisses me off so much is because, right, Ireland has the lowest, tied with Bulgaria, Ireland has the lowest public expenditure for recreational and sporting services. So when you look at Ireland's spending on local sports, like things like pitches, astros, swimming pools, parks, community sports clubs, all right, things that ordinary people in their community can take advantage of. And like coming from a place like Bray, which is essentially like a working class community, and us being one of the biggest towns in Ireland, and we don't even have an astro pitch for the community, which is absolutely shocking. Like compared to the rest of Europe, we are rock bottom. So across the EU, governments spend on average about 0.8 of their budget on community sport and recreation. That's everything that helps ordinary people stay active and connected locally. So, like I said, if you are part of a football team or a basketball team or a running club or, a paddle team or whatever it is, it's like you have community, you have connection, you have everything that you need to stay on top of your mental health. Ireland spends around 0.1%. That's about 1/8 of what European countries spend in regards to community sport, right? So that's basically, if Europe spends €8 on community sport, Ireland spends only €1 on community sport. That comes straight from the European Commission's own data, Eurostat. We are rock bottom of that list with Bulgaria, which just drives me insane, that the fact that, like, in a country that talks about, oh, we need to help people get on top of their mental health, and we need to deal with this crisis of young men who are dying by suicide in this country. The biggest threat to a man under 30 is his own hands, and yet you're not doing anything in regards to helping communities that could, create environments where people could go when they feel low. Like, when you feel like you've nowhere to go, you've no one around you, you've no support, you don't feel connected, you don't feel useful, what is the point in sticking around? And I just think that's like such a thing that you could just focus on, that would really, really improve the physical and mental well-being of people in this country, is give them more opportunities, give them more, we call it third spaces, right? Your first space is home, your second space is work, and your third space is somewhere where you can go, where you can connect with other people. We don't have that anymore. And as much as I'm an advocate of, put money into mental health services, well, you could also create environments in this country where, people feel like they don't actually need to use them services anymore, because they actually feel connected. And we can see across the data where they have things like social prescribing, where it's like, people go to the doctors because they're sick, and it turns out that they're actually disconnected and lonely. And what they do is the doctors suggest that they do different type of community activities, and the rates of hospital appointments reduces dramatically because of it. So I think that's something that we need to be looking at, is that, like, we need to invest more in the community, because that is what's going to essentially help to bring down these deaths by suicide. The total sports budget is expected to be just over 290 million in 2026, but that doesn't look like anything in regards to local level. That doesn't look like anything in regards to the pitches, the gyms, the small volunteer run clubs, the things that keep people connected. And although it's great that, Ireland are putting money into, winning more medals and Olympic programs and athletes and stuff like that, it's not the same as funding local pitches and youth clubs. And keeping community sports affordable for people. And again, in a housing crisis, in a financial crisis, when people don't have money, when people are struggling to put food on the table, and you're not investing anything into community, into sports, like, who's the people that are going to benefit from that the most? Who are the people that are going to benefit from you investing in community sports? Young men from low socio-economic background, the people most at risk of suicide, and they've been forgotten. You have forgotten them, and I think it goes to show where the government's intentions are, is that they focus more on medals than mental health, more on medals than belonging and prevention. So that's where we're at with Ireland right now. And there's so many things I could just start giving out about the government, but I'm not going to bother, because I'll just get myself worked up about that. But yeah, the whole point of this was just to look at it from a systemic point of view, was that, like, if you want to help improve people's mental health, if you want to reduce the numbers of young men dying by suicide, you can't just use slogans anymore. You can't just talk about men need to open up. No, you need to listen. You need to listen that the education system isn't working for young men, that there's a housing crisis, that there's a homeless crisis, that you're not putting any money into community anymore. And I don't think any amount of hours of therapy is probably going to help that. And that's not me bashing therapy. I'm an advocate of therapy. You know, I'll help. I'll help push that to people as much as possible. But there also comes a time where it's like, okay, you have to leave the therapy room, and then what? You know, where's your prospects? Where's your opportunities? Because if you don't feel like there's something to aim for, if you don't feel like you're useful, if you don't feel like you're making a difference in life in any sort of way, then you're gonna continue to come into these thought patterns of, I'm worthless, I'm a piece of shit, and nobody wants me, nobody needs me. I could just die today and it wouldn't make a difference. Nobody's gonna even notice. So I think we should be looking at all these other things as well. Not just focusing on improving people's mental health, but maybe improving people's mental health by pulling them out of poverty, giving them a home, giving them purpose, finding different ways to educate them, maybe investing in some things that engage the community together, rather than, you know, creating divide, which is what this country is basically doing at the moment. Alright, that's all I have for today. Sorry for rambling, but I hope some of that made sense.